Hello, everyone. Today, I'm excited to welcome Maitri Fischer in our podcast. Maitri is a co-founder and principal ESD engineer in Eco-Mantra, and Eco-Mantra an environmental engineering consultancy based in Bali. They work with visionary leaders and developers to create eco-friendly destination by incorporating sustainability design principle into unique property developments. Thank you for being here today, Maitri. Really appreciate it. I was very excited for this episode, actually.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Let's start maybe with your experience. And you grow up in Bali.
Yes.
How does it influence your overall relationship with Bali, with Indonesia, and with environment?
I moved here with my family at the age of 1.
Mm-hmm.
That was 1989, before there really was much tourism. There was already a good amount of tourism, but we certainly were not in our current bubble of mass tourism, so to say. So for me, Bali is home, and the reason why I started Mantra, or our company, is really, it was an emotional response. It was an emotional response to being sad about what I saw every time I came home from when I was doing my university degree. I studied for 6 years abroad. And when I would come home, I would see more and more of Bali that was rice fields disappearing, developments seemed to be going crazy. So the environment was changing. I could feel that the main reason why tourism was coming to Bali was also shifting. It was shifting from cultural tourism that was focused in arts and performance and travelers and backpackers to people looking more for a weekend experience, a getaway, all the modern pleasures that tourism can offer. And we started to get a lot more Australian tourists that would just come for partying and drinking. The first mass tourism was Australians. And so Bali went through this massive change between 2013, 14, and 2018. Went through a massive boom. The first Bali bomb and the second Bali bomb, they kind of slowed things down. But yeah, we had this massive growth of tourism it really started in, let's say, 2008 till 2018. That 10-year period there is really where we got a lot of tourism growth. So yeah, coming back to Bali, seeing the rampant tourism development, and what was very noticeable was a trash problem, that we started to have trash everywhere. And for me, it was really sad to see how much of it was in the rivers and the rice fields where I would play as a child. And we started to have a water problem. I remember it was the summer of 2014, and it was a really strong El Nino year. It was a really dry year. El Nino tends to strengthen the dry season. And people were running out of water in their wells. We ran out of water in our well at home, and that well was being used for more than 10 years. Suddenly it ran dry. That well was being used since the beginning, since probably 1991, and in 2014 it ran dry.
Oh, wow.
And other people's wells were running dry, and I was getting phone calls, and people are asking what's going on, because I guess people knew that I was studying hydrology at the time, and so they thought it would be a good idea to give me a call. But yeah, it just, to me, it was an emotional response to this. It made me very sad. It made me scared for Bali, for my home, and it made me ask the question, what can I do? And over some years, my business partner and I developed the services that we offer our clients today. So yeah, I think the feeling in my heart was like, how do I save Bali, the place that I love
Mm-hmm.
from going to shits. I've also had to realize that I alone, our company alone, cannot change things
Mm-hmm.
like fast enough. We can do our part, and we can play our part, and we're kind of working with a lot of the early movers.
Mm-hmm.
The sad part is that we can't necessarily fix it,
Yeah.
and it's just going to keep going.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for you, like right now? 10 years ago, I guess, when you just started with all of them, it was all very new. That time, not many people were talking about sustainability.
10 years ago, it was more like convincing people that we had a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now people see it.
Mm-hmm.
They feel the waste problem much more. It's so much more in the news.
Right.
The water problem is accepted, that we have a water crisis, almost. I mean, our government hasn't accepted it yet, but despite the fact that researchers at our own universities are hitting the warning bells, the tourism industry is saying we have problems. We have a lot of independent research indicating we have problems. The government is still reluctant to accept the fact that we are facing a water crisis, a water management problem as well. Now it's more accepted, and now there's also a lot more hype about sustainability in tourism in general, not just in Bali, but globally, with obviously the issue of global climate change. And there's a lot more research that is showing that tourism, hospitality, businesses that are ethically involved in reducing their environmental impact create a stronger brand and more loyal customers. And ultimately that helps support them. So it's easier to convince people, and there's more awareness of the issue, but I still think we're at the very beginning. It's just a bit easier. There's, I'd say maybe 5 to 10% of businesses care.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about, like how many businesses overall would, for example, approach you and ask for your assistant or your consultancy service or whatever from like the whole Bali or Indonesia. I mean, we met last year with you. You say you were quite busy, but I guess it's still out of 100 companies, let's say, how many percent would consider your service?
Probably one.
Okay.
Probably one would actually consider our services. Maybe 5 to 10% care somewhat about sustainability. Yeah, I mean, there are not many companies who do what we do globally, and I think we are still the only one in Indonesia who looks at sustainability from a holistic perspective and works to really try and find ways to minimize the environmental footprint of a business. Most of the consulting services that are out there are very focused in the green building sector, where they have a matrix, a formula of what to implement, but it doesn't come up from a position of understanding. It's more like a checkbox. We do it quite differently. Yeah.
Could you please tell me a little bit more about what exactly you're doing for hospitality businesses, and maybe if possible give some examples? I think many people know already about the water bomb and Potato Head. I just recently been in the sustainability tour in Potato Head, and honestly it's quite impressive what you guys and them doing. But if we're talking about these companies, they have enormous budgets and human resources. And you as a support for doing what they doing. How about like smaller businesses? Maybe you have some successful example as well.
Okay, so what we do is quite over the years. What we do has developed into what we call the sustainability journey. We like to look at it like a cycle, like a circle. We have supported businesses at numerous stages of what we call their sustainability journey, starting from kind of discovering what sustainability means. A lot of companies come to us and say, I want sustainability. And we're like, what do you mean? Do you even know what that means? And so it typically starts with a relatively with an interesting educational component. So we work with companies that are, small or big, just learning about sustainability. Maybe we're working with an executive level in the company. Sometimes we're working with management level, and the housekeeping reaches out to us, or chief engineer reaches out to us, and it's like, I don't know where to start. So educating people on what sustainability is and how sustainability can be integrated into their business, and how doing so would benefit them. We do a lot of that work in the earlier stages. Sometimes that means even like executive workshops with CEOs or creatives, just to show them the potential that sustainability has. And then we do a lot of kind of feasibility studies, site assessments, to help clients understand what's feasible for their business. So for new developers who are building a resort, that might mean sending us out in the middle of nowhere to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the site that they're considering, and to develop a very early stage feasibility study for infrastructure and community outreach and social work, to support a sustainably oriented, eco resort, for example. And that might form the foundation of a technical proposal or an investor deck that is then used to also get investment. Now, what we do most of is what we call the design and build. So a lot of clients will then move into okay, I'm ready to build, I'm ready to start designing, sorry. And so we'll work with them in developing the sustainability designs for a restaurant, a hotel, a school, a home, villas, factories, malls. We've done quite a lot of different types of buildings. The idea here is, how do we integrate sustainability, best practices? How do we make a development more ecologically friendly? How do we improve that development for the occupants' better enjoyment? How do we improve their comfort and their health, so to say? Because buildings, we spend a lot of our time in buildings, and poorly designed buildings affect our health. Just think about rising damp and mold and poor humidity control, and these things affect our comfort and ultimately our health as well. How do we develop interesting, sustainable destinations that inspire other people to kind of follow suit? I think that's really a lot of our calling has to do with that. We're in the very early stage of sustainable design and hospitality in Indonesia and the world, and the biggest impact we can have working with early movers is inspiring others to join or to shift their practices, right? And that's why our work with Potato Head and Waterbomb is so important, because they're very strong brands here in Bali and Indonesia and globally. And it proves to the industry that it can be done. It's profitable. It has amazing impacts on the brand. Doing business consciously, doing business well, doing business while doing good for the environment has a win-win effect. And more importantly, it resonates with other owners, other business owners, other management teams that are looking at business from a more holistic perspective and not just about extracting as much profits as they can. So design and build is really important in showing the industry what can be done. And that's where we put about 85% of our effort in the company. And then there's, of course, operating. So then you go into operating these properties. And you want to operate as sustainably as possible, as eco-friendly as possible. You want to share that story with your clients. You want to have ethical communications. I think ethics and sustainability is really important. There's a lot of greenwashing going around. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what it means to be sustainable. So ethical communications in sustainability, in the realm of sustainability, is really important. One, not to dilute and destroy the industry, but two, to also really have strong, accurate communication with your clients, because the ones that care, they are well educated. They're more discerning about what you say, and increasingly, we have a filter on the word sustainability, and you just when you're reading something, it just flies away, flies out. You just fly over it. So, are you actually saying something interesting? Are you actually doing something interesting? Is it impactful? How are you communicating that to make it really resonate with someone who's experiencing your brand or reading about your brand? And how do you actually collect all that data to report? So if you go to Waterbomb, for example, when you walk into the lobby, you're going to see all their environmental data displayed to the public, which shows their performance over time and their current performance and what they're doing in terms of savings. And sharing that information publicly is also really important. It's a best practice in reporting, so to say, right? We have to be open and transparent for the public to also trust us and believe us and to see. It has to go beyond just saying we're green, right? So obviously clients work with us at any stage in this journey. Sometimes they start with us in operations and then they design a new hotel with us, and we go around that way. So we do quite a bit in the life cycle of a developer or operator.
I think it's very important to explain this step by step, and to talk that's just to put the cart on the bed, that's you are washing the bed sheets once in a while. It's not making you green. I mean, it's a good initiative, but there is a lot of controversy I see even in the hotels who's putting those signs, and then at the same time they offering all the one-time use wrapped in plastic, you know, amenities or whatever else. So like we really, I mean, sustainability somehow very fast become hype, and that's trendy word which everyone want to have and use and put the green leaf on their page.
And this is dangerous. This is really dangerous.
It is dangerous.
Because it desensitizes the consumer.
Yeah. In what stage do you think developers and the business owner should normally like approach you and start to thinking about sustainability?
Any stage is good.
Okay. But I guess as soon as better.
The sooner the better, sure. But it depends if they're already operating or if they're looking at developing something new. If they're already operating, any time is a good time. If they're going to develop something new, the earlier the better. Our environmentally sustainable design services, which are involved in the design and build of new properties, is our approach is designed to work with the architects, the landscape designers, the interior designers, the structural engineers, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, which we do as well internally, but sometimes clients have their own teams. It's really designed to work together in what we call the integrated design process, and it relies on a very early, from the beginning, like master plan, concept design phase, integration. So when the architects have started work and they're having their creative orgasms of how to make a beautiful hotel or guest room or villa or whatever it is, we want to be there. We want to be at that point saying, okay, this is a great idea, but we need to think about this and this because we're getting too much sun here. We actually would like to use a different roof material so that we can harvest the rainwater. We want to be part of that very beginning, because when the architects move too far ahead, they become very reluctant to change their designs, which is completely understandable. You get emotionally engaged to something you've created, and then someone comes later on and says, hey, let's change it. Right? It's not easy. And we all have ego. Architects have ego. We have ego. Everyone's got ego, and every team has a different dynamic. So the earlier you work together, the easier it is to be a team that is doing something together, as opposed to having some guy come in and tell you, let's change this and that, and it's not good enough, and blah, blah, blah. And And then you got to think, oh, well, I'm already advanced in my design and I don't have any more time or fees left to make design changes. So the best time is the earlier stage.
Mm-hmm.
It means that we can do a lot more. It means that we can do a lot more complex sustainability integration. It means that the cost of design changes are much lower. So the integrated design process requires early intervention, ideally in concept design, master plan. And with some clients, especially repeat clients, they will get us involved prior to getting an architect involved. So we'll be out there on site already working with them, looking at the pros and cons of a site before getting an architect engaged. Or sometimes we even start very, very early with the architects and us, just two teams, to produce a concept design together. And that's incredibly rewarding because then you can really optimize a building for everything, so to say, right? When we, in our work, we focus primarily in like embodied carbon of the materials in the building, the efficiency and the operational carbon produced by running a building, so the energy consumption. We focus a lot in reducing the groundwater consumption of the projects because groundwater is our limited resource. And we do that by bringing in all kinds of different strategies like rainwater harvesting, wastewater recycling, nature-based solutions and water management, the landscapes. And we focus a lot in waste management. You've seen some of that work at Potato Head. We can take it as far as the clients want to go. I think Potato Head is less than 2% waste to landfill, which is probably one of the best in the world. I can't be sure, but it's amazing. At least for a hotel, it's amazing. And we are doing increasingly more and more work in regenerative design, nature-based solutions, ecology, ecosystem restoration, to try and integrate these philosophies, these design areas into the development of new properties. How do we be sensitive? How can we be sensitive to all of these things at the same time without talking about certification or grades or a stamp? What's the best way to do it?
Yeah. Talking about water and choosing the right location, how can you assist the client, or what would be your suggestion? For example, now considering Bali water crisis, like we see a huge development over Uluwatu, what can you suggest to the client when they picking up their location?
I wish every client would come to us when they were selecting a site, because then we could explain to them, this is an appropriate development for this site. And it has to start with an understanding of what we call environmental boundaries or the carrying capacity of the ecosystem, the environment. So, an environment can support all the animals and plants and people and things that are there to a certain degree, right? Before people existed, we have an ecosystem balance between plants and animals, predators and whatnot, eating each other and keeping each other in check and in bay. This natural balance. People come in and they destroy this natural balance, right? Because we have technology and we don't need to rely on what nature can give us through its cycles and through its services. We can force that. We can drill a well and pull out more water than we can get from the rivers and the lakes. We can get enough energy from electricity, which is sent with cables, because we don't need to just get energy from firewood in our environment. And if we cut down too many trees, we would die, right? We've engineered our environment. That's why it's called the Holocene, right? We are the masters of the environment. We're also pretty bad at thinking long term and pretty bad about thinking about the welfare of everyone else. And we're very self-centered and trying to get the most out of the environment for us. Industrious, capitalist, whatever you want to call it. And this is leading us to where we are, using up too many resources and producing too much pollution that the environment is actually able to provide. So we have gone beyond the carrying capacity of the environment in most places. That means if we discarded our wastewater, the environment cannot clean it up in time. it will start polluting our rivers. Just like our waste. We don't have the infrastructure to manage our waste. It's ending up in the rivers and the oceans. Our water, we don't have enough water to support all these villas in the Bukit, all these hotels in the Bukit. So people are drilling deep wells, and it's brackish, it's saline. They start producing reverse osmosis plants, or you need a reverse osmosis plant in a hotel. You're forcing all of this. People have septic tanks, and they discard the treated wastewater, which is still has a high BOD and COD, into the aquifers or into soak pits that go into the aquifers, and we're contaminating our groundwater. So in the Bukit particularly, we don't have enough fresh water. What fresh water is there is largely polluted by a lot of the wastewater being discharged into soak pits and canals. And we have way too many developments going on that seem to think that they can bypass all of these natural limitations with technology. And to some degree they can, but we're very close to a tipping point there, I think. Recently we did a site study for a French client who's building a villa there, and we went around the neighborhood and asked to sample the water from different people's groundwater wells, and all the water was brackish. In some wells it was almost seawater, so no more fresh water in the area. It's all been sucked up, and what that does is it pulls in seawater from the coast. So you end up having saltwater intrusion, which is driven by all these wells sucking up water on land. So there's no fresh water, and they cannot rely on municipal water. There's weeks where there's no water from the municipality.
I know some businesses who doesn't have it since October last year.
Yeah.
1
So
year, basically.
how do you support yourself? How do you do something? There should be a limitation on development there, because the government isn't giving licenses for wells. You don't have municipal water that can support you. How are you supposed to operate? People are all most businesses are operating illegally, drilling their own wells, desalinating, or accepting salty water, and the water is not of quality for human use. It has to go through quite a lot of processing. So there we've reached the carrying capacity of the environment. It's very clear, but yet it continues. And that's because people see the opportunity of their business. It's a very popular area. People love. It's beautiful.
It is.
And a bustling community is forming. And people don't want to miss out on that opportunity. And the government is not enforcing any limitations, or even its environmental law. We do have a lot of projects in the Bukit, and you mentioned that you withdrew from a project. For us, the way we look at it is these projects are happening whether we like it or not. And when a client comes to us and says, we have a project in the Bukit, the first thing we talk about is the water problem. And we discuss how we're going to get water. And our goal is, at most, like, how can we minimize as much as possible your water consumption in that area. That's always a huge focus there. So we try and reduce their groundwater footprint by 50-60%. And it's very doable, but it doesn't make that development sustainable. It makes it more eco-friendly, more green, but it's far from sustainable. So I think it's important to differentiate between what is real sustainable development and what is just less harm, which we typically call, green building or that's basically what green building is, just trying to do less harm. It's not sustainable development. Sustainable development means that we can sustain that activity in that area indefinitely, and developing in the Bukit, it cannot be sustainable.
It's more enforcing. Really. Talking about the water systems and water conservation, what could be a solution for the small businesses, for example, for small hotels or for the small houses who, I don't know if it's possible to create all the rain harvesting system in the small villas, for example, or just the private sector? But what is possible to do? How they can cause less harm?
A lot is possible. A lot is possible. The solutions for hotels and the solutions for homes or individual villas, they're not vastly different. They're relatively similar. A lot can be done. It really depends on what cost you expect to be able to develop. We get a lot of people who come our way and they say, look, I've got a budget of $600, $800 a square meter, and I want to build this amazing luxury villa, and I want it to be super sustainable and run off of rainwater. It's not possible. You can't build with luxurious materials a 3-story villa or have a big restaurant and expect to be able to have it run sustainably on a small 1-hour plot of land. So we usually do spend quite a bit of time managing expectations and explaining to people what's actually possible. A lot can be done. So for example, any house, any restaurant, any villa, a small property can do rainwater harvesting. If done appropriately, rainwater harvesting can reduce your groundwater footprint by 25 to 40%. Any property can process their wastewater with proper wastewater treatment plant. There are small prefabricated systems that are made for smaller villas, restaurants, and houses, and you can recycle that water to irrigate the garden. So you can reduce your garden irrigation needs through wastewater. The beautiful thing about that is wastewater is always available. If you're running a villa, you're always in the shower. You're always in the, you're always producing wastewater. If you're a restaurant or a school, you're always producing wastewater. So even in the dry season, that source doesn't run out, so to say. With rainwater harvesting, you don't have rainwater in the dry season. So rainwater harvesting used for irrigation is not a great idea. It's helpful, but it has a very low impact. Because in the rainy season, you don't really need to irrigate. It's in the dry season where you need alternative sources of water. So combining rainwater harvesting to produce clean water and wastewater recycling to irrigate your garden, just these two very simple basic things, can reduce your groundwater footprint by 50%.
Oh, wow.
And it's feasible, it makes sense, it's not too expensive for households, for schools, for restaurants, for villas, no problem. Then it's really important to focus on efficient water fixtures. You can reduce your water consumption by 20 to 30% by having efficient fixtures. And don't forget, if you're going to build in the Bukit and you expect to have a big pool, you're not really in touch with what's going on, right? So when people come to us and say, I want to build this house and the pool is the same size as the house, for some reason people love these big pools. First thing we try to do is say, can we get rid of the pool? Or if they're doing multiple villa developments, we'll say, can we not have pools in the villa? Can we have one pool for your 25 villas that you're developing and have that as a shared pool for the community? That way we're going to have much, much less water consumption, right? Because pools are a huge user of water. Every time you backwash a filter of a pool, you're using 500 to 2,000 liters of water. And you got to do that 2 times a week. Big pool, 1,500, 2,000 liters of water every 3-4 days. So how can you create more public infrastructure? That's also a really important tactic that people somehow forget. They all want a villa with a pool because that's the image of luxury, right? But it's completely negligent about what the environment can support. So eliminating things is a great way, and efficient water appliances is a great way. If you don't want to eliminate the pool, make it smaller. The amount of water used for backwash is in some way proportional to the volume of water in the pool. So make a pool that's smaller. If you're in the Bukit and you must absolutely have a pool so that it's Instagrammable, make a plunge pool, not a lap pool. That would be really helpful. All of this can be done and it's feasible.
What do you think is the biggest challenge hospitality businesses face now in terms of sustainability?
I think it really depends who you're talking to. I think the biggest problem, like on the topic of sustainability and development, the biggest problem is negligence and we meet all kinds of people who are doing business here. Some people are here just to make money. They don't care about anything else. They've caught on to the villa. Let's just give an example. They've caught on to the villa model. Get some land, put a villa on there, rent it out on Airbnb. Hundreds, if not thousands of people are doing that. Villa developers here have built over 4,000 villas under that model for people, and all over the place. People get 12 to 20% return on investment year on year. They're here just for that. They don't care about sustainability. They don't care about how well something is built. They don't care about anything else but I'm going to invest in property and real estate and make money. That's your biggest problem. You got people doing shit here. They don't care. The next kind of client is, okay, I'm doing business here. I want to do it better. I know we have environmental problems. How can I be more conscious, more responsible? And we get most of our clients are like that. They've got a conscience, right? But I think they're maybe less than 5% of all development in Bali, and maybe less than 1% in Indonesia. And with them, we have the opportunity to develop a sustainable design for them to build. And the biggest challenges we have there is discussing budgets and costs. Sustainability, most of the time, will increase your budget. On small developments, we see it's about 5 to 10%. These are very small houses. On larger developments, villas, hotels, it's about 2 to 3%. That'll be an additional cost to construction. But we have a very strong focus in life cycle cost assessments in our company. It's one of the things we do on all of our projects. We are able to show to our clients, look, we're proposing these 15 different strategies to make your project more green, and it's going to cost you in total an additional X amount, but these are the efficiency gains. We do a lot of modeling and benchmarking in our work that allows us to actually relatively accurately tell the client what the savings are. And we know what things cost, so we also are able to show what it costs to build and what it will cost to maintain. So we can do a life cycle cost assessment. And depending on the client's appetite, we will develop a portfolio of sustainability solutions that will pay back in, let's say, 4 to 10 years. So a hotel developer, they're going to get their money back in 8 to 15 years. That's the rough ROI for a hotel. Somewhere, 4-star, 5-star hotel is 8 years is amazing. Most of it right now is 10, 12, 13, 14 years to get your money back off of a hotel. Villa developers, everyone's promising them 5 years, but this is not really true anymore. It's more like 14 to 17% ROI with villas. So you're going to get your money back in 7, 8 years? So our portfolio of solutions, additional investments into sustainability, adding solar panels, rainwater harvesting, improving your pool filtration systems, whatever it is, composting, blah, blah, blah. This pays back better than your actual asset itself. Suddenly investing into sustainability improves your ROI and your asset. And large developers, they know this, they understand that. And we see increasingly a need for sustainability and efficiency in larger projects. But the same is valid for smaller projects. So if you're getting your money back in, let's say, 7 years, and your villa is going to pay back in 8, we've improved your investment. So usually the problem is a fear of, oh my God, it's going to be expensive. How do we manage all of that? But we've got the tools to help them navigate that process.
Yeah, I think this is also the stereotype we already have in our heads, especially as a business owner. That's what I'm quite often facing too. That's when we start talking about sustainability. Even the simple things like a waste management, for example, people get a little bit like, first, oh, that's expensive.
Yes.
Oh, that will increase our cost on this amount of. But in the long perspective, if we're looking into it. So I think, this a good strategy to inform the people how good it's going to work in the future for them. Another thing I'm a little bit concerned is that many people I think that's maybe still COVID post effect, the people not really willing to think about future much.
Mm.
They're kind of living with today,
Mm-hmm.
like, or I will get my money back in a year or something, which is like, no, never.
Yeah.
But maybe slowly again. Like, I think that's another thing. As more we're talking about it and as more it is out there, there is a solution. They are not that expensive. It is possible to implement them not only for the huge 5-star hotels, but also for the small houses,
Yeah.
even for the private sector. As more people get educated about it, as more easy it will become
Mm-hmm.
for them to accept. Talking about resources available
Mm-hmm.
in Bali and Indonesia in general, I think this is another big question when we're talking about building.
Mm-hmm.
What is available and how, again, if for example we're talking about solar panels, right, they are they're available now on the market, but what's happening after?
Mm-hmm.
The solutions of their recycling in Indonesia, I think, is not there yet. So
Okay. That's it.
resources and material for the building, how can we build better with what we have here?
So for us, we kind of put this in the umbrella of embodied carbon.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your carbon footprint to build a house or a hotel, so to say? There's a carbon emission associated with, with this paneling, which I'm not sure if it's timber or veneer. It looks like solid timber, but there's a carbon footprint associated with the materials behind you, producing the glass for the framing, producing all these things. There's a smaller carbon footprint, perhaps less, with this recycled beautiful bench here, but there's going to be a massive carbon footprint associated with the concrete and the steel used in the foundation and the structure of a building. So for us, the goal right now that we have, the building sector contributes 40% of global carbon emissions. So we're all responsible for that. How do we reduce that? The current goal, in line with trying to keep the IPCC goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, is that we need to decarbonize the materials in buildings by 40% by 2030. And by 2030, we need to be operationally net zero. So we need to be running at net zero in terms of operations. But we're talking about building right now. It's impossible to decarbonize a building with just the furnishings, right? A lot of people look at it and they're like, these are beautiful recycled things, great, it's sustainable. Yes, it is, but it's less than 1% of the carbon footprint of the building you're in. So you really got to deal with the elephant in the room, which is the structure of the building. That's where 80% of the embodied carbon is. And so how do you decarbonize the structure of a building? You have to move towards nature-based, natural-based materials. Concrete and steel will always have a very high carbon footprint. So the industry globally, the response to that requirement is moving towards glue laminated timber or engineered timber, which is basically smaller pieces of wood all glued and laminated together to produce bigger beams and structural components. And in Indonesia, we have a lot of bamboo, so we're also now in the early stages. There's a company here, Indo Bamboo, that is developing engineered bamboo products, for example, and these can be used as structural components. Now, this is still in development. We might be a few short years away from seeing these buildings come up. There's a building being built in Sanur right now using this material. We need to be developing with materials, structural materials, that do not have the associated carbon footprint. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's what it really comes down to in terms of sustainability of materials. Now, the bigger overarching topic is nature-based materials. So we have been using a lot of engineered, fabricated materials in factories, and to reduce then the carbon footprint of the facade, of the furnishings, we need to move towards nature-based materials. So, lime plasters, Tadillac plasters for walls. For bricks, we need to be using clay bricks or recycled bricks that have a much lower carbon footprint than, concrete poured walls. We need to be moving towards using a lot more sustainable materials in the roof, so away from, bitumen and steel roofs towards natural clay roofs, bamboo shingles. Be careful with ulin, the timber roofs, because they are essentially hardwood timber from the forest. Most of it's illegal deforestation. Try not to do timber roofing, at least in Indonesia, right? So what kind of fabrics for sofas and couches? We have a lot of natural options as opposed to synthetic options, right? There's even companies making fabrics from recycled
Plastic.
yarns and things like that. When we talk about timber being used in wall paneling, in roofs, for structures, be very careful about what timber you're using. If we're going to use really high quality materials, you can use teak from plantations. It's quite sustainable. Or you can use engineered bamboo, engineered timber, or you can use recycled wood, recycled hardwoods. There are companies that sell them. As much as possible, reduce your hardwood use, because that's all coming from primary forests. You can't grow hardwoods, they grow too slow, right? So if you're going to go hardwood, use recycled hardwood. Teak is relatively fast growing, and there's a lot of plantations in Indonesia, and it's almost a hardwood. I think depending on the quality of teak, some of it is already defined as hardwood. So there's good quality teak here, and if you want really good quality stuff, you get the old recycled stuff, and you replane it. So we need to support businesses and organizations and creatives and founders that are providing nature-based solutions. Another one that's kind of hyped or interesting right now is the use of mycelium in building components. So creating insulative panels or sandwich panels which are filled with mycelium, essentially sawdust or coconut husks that is then inoculated with fungi, and it creates the mycelium network creates this airy kind of tofu tempeh building component. We need to move the construction sector in this direction to start decarbonizing buildings, away from classical building components like gypsum ceilings and stuff like that. We need to go more natural.
I guess there is a lot of traditional practices which have been forgotten with the cement and batako and all of these modern things come to Indonesian market, right? And if we're looking into the houses structure, roofing, and how they were built many years ago, we can find a lot of solutions there. We just need to adapt them probably to our modern life.
Yes and no, because the reason why we are here with the current materials is because those materials in the past, those ways of building in the past, were not convenient and or resilient, right? So we don't really want to go back to mud brick houses, right? Although that would be super sustainable. So what's the modern alternative? The modern alternative is compressed stabilized earth bricks, or I don't promote it for the tropics, but a lot of people really like rammed earth. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for the tropics, but people really do like it. Rammed earth is better suited for dry, but there's a lot that we can learn from the past, especially with respect to roofing, especially with respect to like insulation materials. What's popular now, or what's becoming more popular now in the West, is something called hempcrete. Now we don't grow hemp in Indonesia, because we don't need to go into that, but we do have hibiscus fiber that can be produced here, which is in the same family or similar family to hemp, if not the same. Not the expert on the topic, but they're very closely related. And this hibiscus hemp, cross is grown here, and it's used to produce rope for the shipping industry. And it's one of the things that made Indonesia very famous.
Okay.
So we could develop, this hibiscus crete and produce sandwich panels with that and insulate buildings with that. There's a lot that can be borrowed from the past and adjusted for the modern times and the way we build currently, right? I think that's important to marry the past and the present.
Okay. What advice would you give to the small, medium business, I think to every businesses here in Bali, where to start their sustainability journey?
Start with one thing. You don't have to do the whole thing, so to say. What I mean by the whole thing is like you don't have to do everything. Start by something that really matters to your business and your brand. So if you're a clothing company, look at your supply chain. How can you get better yarn or better cloth, that is organically grown, that has a lower carbon footprint? How can you make sure that the production process is ethical, respectful of the people who make the garments? How can you source your stuff as locally as possible? Right? If you're a restaurant, how do you manage your wastewater responsibly? I think that's a really big one here. A lot of restaurants are not managing their wastewater really appropriately. All businesses, but restaurants are there are a lot of them. How can you work with farmers to get local produce, minimizing as much as possible, things that need to be imported? I mean, if you're a gourmet restaurant that needs butter and cheese, okay, look at something else. But, try and minimize foreign products. Try and use as much as possible what's local. And, manage your wastewater properly. Look at your supply chains. You can always add solar panels. These are very easy. There's nothing complicated there. It doesn't need any extra SOPs. So you can very easily reduce your water footprint, reduce your carbon footprint just with some small things. And it makes financial sense. So do something small, but try and make it personal to your business, right? Because then it helps you tell a story, and stories are powerful. It helps you develop a brand, and it helps you gain more loyal following, more loyal customers. It helps you stand out from the crowd. Do it in a way that's impactful to your business, your vision, your mission. And then, if you want to keep going, but do something small that's meaningful for your brand,
Looking forward, what innovation or initiative in sustainability can be very helpful in Indonesian Bali and for the hospitality business in future? What are you personally looking for?
Food waste is a big problem. A lot of food is thrown out, and a lot of waste doesn't end up in the landfills. Branded businesses that, bigger companies, they're quite conscious about where their waste goes, but a lot of small businesses still have their waste picked up by local villagers. So I really look forward to, I don't know if it's reasonable to expect for Indonesia, but I'd really look forward to some more innovation in materials that are for packaging, because a lot of the packaging materials in the F&B industry, they can't be recycled. I think a lot of care needs to be put into food packaging and what happens with that and whether it's recyclable or not, because it has to match our local infrastructure, has to match what we in Indonesia can actually recycle, right? There's these bioplastic things, but science has showed us it's not really the solution. They have to go to industrial composters. We don't have any of those, right? So, and they tend to break up or they tend to break up or disintegrate when in contact with water or heat. So they're not really the solution yet. But we really do need, something in packaging and in F&B, and then in materials and construction. I really look forward to engineered timber products. This is just starting now in Indonesia. There's 3 or 4 companies that are in the space. Most of them are in engineered timber, but we have this huge potential in engineered bamboo products as well. So I really look forward to that in terms of materials coming online, because like I said, we have to decarbonize buildings, and the biggest problem there is the structural components, the steel and the concrete. We can only really do that with recycled, with timber. And then, in water, I think we have all the solutions in water to manage the problems we have. So I don't really see the need for anything there. In energy generation, solar panels are so easy. We have so much potential here, and they pay back in like 5 to 6 years. So we're already happy with that. Things are just going to get cheaper and more affordable and more feasible. But wind energy is really lacking in Indonesia.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd really like to see more small players come on board with wind generation solutions. And we've spoken to a few vendors, and mostly, on the small scale, there is nothing really available. I only know of one vendor in the whole country, and they're not really serious about it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we bring small scale, vertical helix wind turbines to everyone who's on the beach or the side of the road, or has a 3-story building that can put one on top?
Yeah.
They're generating power all the time.
Yeah.
So that would be something great to have more access to in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Maitri, thank you so much for this conversation. I hope it was insightful for our listeners. And thank you for your time. It's amazing work what you're doing. It's truly inspired.
Thank you for having us.